Do you know anyone that got caught on that show, To Catch a Predator? If so, how did their lives turn out? I also knew a man that was caught, not on the show, but in a county sheriff run online raid. He was a teacher, a coach, ran extracurricular clubs, well known in the community, a scout leader, busted with condoms, lube and a digital camera. The case ended up going to federal court after the discovery of child pee on his computer. He was sentenced to 10 years, with 25 years supervised probation following his release, still in prison. Interestingly enough, I was a member of both the scout troop and the school where he worked and never heard saw anything that indicated what was going on. In fact, the whole case came as a shock to pretty much everyone in the community. I do. He was in the military, just got home and was lured to the home of a 13-year-old girl. He showed up, took his shirt off and was confronted. He was acquitted. His parents have a fair amount of money and frankly anyone who can afford a decent lawyer will get off on this. The kid has been arrested several times since, is in and out of rehab and is pretty much a menace to society. He was still a little scummy before being on the show but his life definitely took a turn for the worse. Barry's very good. A teacher from a high school in my area got caught on that show. He was fired, had to register as a sex offender and then was forced to move out of the area. Yes, he got a shorter sentence by allowing them to use the footage for the show and when he got out he only went after 18-year-olds. He was 42. And when he got out he only went after 18-year-olds. The system works. There's a FB page for my county that sets up unofficial stings. 20-year-old got caught trying to cheat on his girl with the 14-year-old. Tried go shaggy his way out of it and got dumped. A friend I knew since junior high got busted on this show. He showed up, walked in the front door, knew something suspicious was happening, turns and leaves out the front door, only to be arrested. He was in GA for ROTC training when it happened. He was sentenced to a few years in prison in GA, then got out and moved back home. He was a LT in the Guard, was working on his PhD in chemistry, all gone now. Don't know what he does now. I had to distance myself after that. The interesting part is all the signs you don't see till afterwards. His first wife thought she caught him looking at child pee, and they had a big fight over it. She divorced him. He then started dating a girl who looked really young, who he then knocked up. Turns out the girl was only 15 when that happened. He was probably 25. Also, he was at a party less than a week after he got home from deployment to Iraq. A girl came out of the restroom, and he was laying on the couch staring at her and jerking off. She told me, and I never mentioned it. I wrote it off as the stress of rotating back to the real world after 12-16 months in a war zone. I don't know what he's up to now. Still lives in the area I think. But he had a good life started and threw it all away. I don't know anyone personally. I used to be big into Yahoo chat. Hooked up with a few girls from there. Legal age, of course. However, I believe that I was being baited once by perverted justice. I was on Yahoo chat one evening, in my state chatroom when an IM pops up from a girl with the screen name Kelly14 for fun. She asks how old I was. I was 21 at the time. I decided to chat with her, but I kind of knew it was a setup so I kept it clean since I have no desire to send sexually explicit chats with a 14-year-old. She kept asking me about sex and what I've done with girls and if I wanted to meet up. I never answered her questions and just diverted from answering. I told her I had to go and she ended the conversation with okay whatever. Loss. LOL. I logged off, made a new screen name and went back online. Same girl IMs me and I tell her I'm 15. She tells me she's not interested and leaves. I smell a setup. Your hunch was right. Yup, guy I worked with. He was in Jerry for 2 weeks of training and decided to hook up with a teenage girl on his weekend. Didn't work out though, obviously. He died in prison before the trial though. He had some pre-existing condition and quit taking his medication so I guess it was suicide. He left behind a wife and kids too, so I can't imagine what that guy put them through. He had some pre-existing condition and quit taking his medication so I guess it was suicide. Or they refused to give him the medication he needs to stay alive and he died. It happens a lot more than you think. Mostly because they cover it up so they don't get called out for literally killing someone through neglect. It's most common with insulin though. I went to preschool through 8th grade with a guy who got caught by an internet police sting from a different state. Basically, he was a substitute teacher. He met some fake 13-year-old in a chat room and sent pictures of his dong and a video of himself masturbating for her. Turns out, the girl was a state trooper a few states over. So, they talked to the state from my home state, and he was arrested without incident at his home. He pleaded guilty and to some lower charge and got probation. Everyone I grew up with found out though, because it was in the news since he was a teacher. He was an odd dude growing up. He was the kid who went through puberty in 1st or 2nd grade, so he was taller than everyone, had a deep voice, and hair where there was no hair before, and he liked to show that off. He would tower over people and push them around. In gym, he would linger in the nude for a long time, just so everyone could see that he was fully developed. He was generally a really odd guy, and terribly obnoxious sometimes. He frequently smelled pretty bad. However, he never struck me as a bad person, just someone I didn't want to be friends with. I lost track of him after high school, but I heard he got really religious at some point in university. Apparently he didn't want to hear any curse words, and would stop conversations if someone said anything he deemed vulgar. I last saw him at a mutual friend's wedding. He had gotten married to this really nice girl whom he brought to the wedding. She was awfully sweet and clearly saw something in him that I had missed. I feel bad for her, as I think she was at home when the surprise arrest occurred, and she probably had no clue what was going on in his head. I'm not sure if they are still married. Well, that's all I got. About 7 years ago, a teacher at my old high school got caught in a police sting attempting to meet up with a young boy. I didn't know him well at all, but he seemed like a friendly, if quiet, young man. His wife, however, a brilliant PhD who visibly lamented her standing as a high school teacher, remained at the school. The next year I had her for an economics class. We didn't learn anything about economics, but she did entertain us with ultra bitter, critic complaints about her ex-husband. She also brought their young child to class about 1/3 of the time, and once she told us the story of the first and only time she tried acid. Reading that back, it's not a very interesting story, but there were so few responses that I couldn't help posting. Yep, went to basic training with the guy. Really messed up story actually. Dude got married and had a kid. He used to always have fights with his wife though and either complain about it or apologize on Facebook all the time. All I knew at the time was that she was looking at his MySpace messages and got pee, so I imagined she caught him flirting online. Well, after what looked like a rough Facebook fight, she committed suicide a couple of days later. Really sad. What was even sadder was that he left his kid with the grandparents and went to Florida 2 weeks later to relax and get away from things. Well, lo and behold, a few days later someone posted a video of him entering a house and getting tackled by cops. Turns out he had been talking to a 14-year-old about how he wants to do some messed up stuff with her, and that's why the wife committed suicide. What's even more messed up is the dude only spent like a month or 2 in jail before he got released and even got to keep his job and kid. I think he's the scum of the earth after figuring all this out, and I guess pretty much everyone else did too, cause they all posted about it on his Facebook. Last I saw, it looked like his life was getting back to normal, but at that point he tried to contact me to see how I was lately, and I removed him from my friends list without replying. That is disturbing. A guy who was caught on that show worked for my mom. I think he might have gotten deported afterwards or he fled the country. He had pretty good IT experience by that point, so he would have done pretty well once he got back. The truly crazy part is that he has a very distinctive first name. My first name. For some reason, according to mom logic, that meant I was probably a pedophile. I guess her crazy logic was that since I liked underage teenage girls at that time, since I was an underage teenage boy and I had the same first name as that guy she knew who was a pedophile equals I was a pedophile. She kept trying to punish me before I finally blew up at her and told her she was freaking insane. My dad must have agreed since he didn't punish me for cussing her out. TLDR. I told my mom she was freaking insane because she used the transitive property incorrectly. The son of one of my clients was caught almost 8 years ago, and the entire thing was featured on the show. He got booked, went through the system. He has a privileged background and was able to get a very, very good attorney. Throughout the process he had to give up his computer internet, but after a year or so he was able to regain access. He did time served, spent less than a week in jail, and then he was on probation. His life continued on. He still works in the same field, definitely unable to be as successful as he could have potentially been, but it didn't destroy his life. I'm sure this would have been a drastically different story if his family didn't have money. I do. It was the brother of a guy I know. It was before it was an actual show, but it was the same company. This was presumably a trial run for the show, I guess. This was in AZ. He was 19ish years old in college and met a 16-year-old girl in a chat room. The fricked up part is that the communications went on for about a month, with the girl continuously contacting him and begging him to come meet her. He finally gives in and is then arrested. There was a big class action lawsuit made by the men of people that were caught this way for the method which was used to arrest them, which was entrapment. AZ apparently gave the TCA or people a slap on the wrist but kept everyone in prison. I think he ended up serving 6+ years and is registered sex offender. He got out of prison a few years ago. I've boycotted the show. I feel like it creates more predators than it actually catches. A 19-year-old banging a 16-year-old is not a pedophile. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What you wonder is, how do middle-aged men delude themselves into actually believing a 14-year-old chick wants to have sex with them? Furthermore, why do they think that sending close-up photos of their dong and saggy balls will turn her on? I have seen interviews with predators who have met 5-6 different girls on the internet and hooked up before they are caught. It does happen. So I kind of know too. First guy, there was a delivery guy that I knew that got caught in a sting on the show. He didn't show up for work one day and said it was because he got taken to jail for parking tickets. No one thought anything of it. 1-2 months later the episode airs, and he doesn't show up for work the next day. They had previously done a background check on him and was clean. His fiance's dad bailed him out of jail knowing what the charge is for. Last I heard they were still getting married, and he was working for his fiance's dad. Second guy, good friend's older brother was chatting online. The person online asked to meet up, and he kept refusing. He just liked chatting. Eventually they go after him anyway and publish his identity online and all the chat logs. He loses his job, loses fiancé, has to get registered as a sex offender and move back with his parents. He couldn't get work for a while, so he lived off of online poker, actually quite decently. Ended up getting a better lawyer, and is getting his record cleaned. He still has to go to see a therapist as part of his probation. The person online asked to meet up, and he kept refusing. He just liked chatting. Eventually they go after him anyway and publish his identity online and all the chat logs. That crap should be illegal. I remember when this show was getting started, and perverted justice was making headlines. A few times I had been on chat sites chatting with girls, mostly just chatting just to chat. But I'd be lying if I said that it didn't bother me if the chat turned sexual. I wasn't into sexual role playing, wouldn't get hardcore filthy, and certainly wouldn't exchange pictures or other personal details, like so many people who get busted seem to do. And I would never push a sexual discussion if they weren't interested in it as well. But at the same time I wouldn't not talk about it if it came up. But one time I remember how quickly she started to hint about sex. And the conversation quickly went into talking about it. We talked about what we liked in boys, girls, what some things felt like, erections, periods, what we've done with others, stuff like that. Then she started dropping hints about if I could come over to her house when her parents were away. When that happened, it seemed really pretty obvious, pretty quickly, that the person on the other end was almost certainly bullshitting. I've never had any desire to pursue anything more than a chat and fantasy, and wouldn't ever follow up on something like that in real life. So I just kind of talked to them a few more minutes and then politely exited the conversation. She said she lived in a state next to mine, but it wasn't in a state where one of the Catch a Predator shows were filmed. But nonetheless, in hindsight and the way she talked, I am pretty sure it was a sting operation. That was about 10 ago and it kind of freaked me out. Text chat rooms are pretty much dead now, so I like to stay on the much more legal side of adult entertainment. I used to work in a gift shop at a museum. One day this man comes and pays with a credit card. My co-worker recognized his name from one of these shows and looked him up. Perfect match. He was totally normal. No weird vibes from him. Maybe because I wasn't a 13-year-old girl, but kind of unfortunate that a random cashier could recognize him. Months if not years after the incident. My friend of mine didn't end up on To Catch a Predator, but he has a similar story. When he was in his low 20s, he was talking to a girl online that was actually law enforcement claiming to be an underage girl. I'm not sure exactly what age. They had sexually explicit chats, but as far as I know, he never showed up at her house with beer and condoms or anything. He ended up getting probation and couldn't go near a school for like 2 years or something. He's a great guy now, though. He was kind of a jerk in high school, but he seems to have really matured as a result of this incident. Or just as a result of growing up, I don't know. You think people would stop responding to propositions from minors online after the popularity of shows like TCAP? A friend of mine was caught going to visit a 16-year-old girl, aka police officer, when he was 19. He actually did get a slap on the wrist because he never said anything to her which was sexual. The police made all of the innuendos. The worst part was that they used a real girl's identity for all of this. So when it all came down, her family sued the frick out of the police department for defamation. But to me, that was the most fricked up part. The key is, confess to Hansen that you like to roleplay with the other person pretending to be an underage girl. In fact, you're not even into girls. You're into guys who roleplay being 14 years old girls online. I didn't want to get weird in front of her when I saw this 14 years old come out. I was shocked. Didn't know how to react, so I played it cool. I thought we had an understanding. I just don't like the other person breaking character. I want them to be convincing. WTF is a real 14 years old doing online in my sex chat forum? What kind of parent lets that happen? This is an offense against ME. Is there a little girl here all by herself? Tobias Funke from Arrested Development, walking into his daughter's former house, where a child molester entrapment TV show is being filmed. Man, I have seen that show and they sure as frick need to get a new room. If I were to go to a little kid's house and they had she says she is baking cookies and will be right out, I am getting the frick out. Diversify your set, damn it. Yep, bake a lasagna or something. Lasagna is something I can get on board with. An acquaintance of mine was married to someone she later found out was freaking crazy. After a year of them being together, she found out he was cheating on her with a 15-year-old girl and they were plotting to kill her for insurance money and run away together. Almost needless to say, he's in jail now and I'm glad she's safe. It seems weird when you see it on the news, but when you've actually met the person on TV who's being arrested for whatever it's called when you premeditate a murder but don't actually succeed in killing the person, and at the time thought they were totally normal, it's pretty messed up. My time to shine. Ahem. So I was 15 and asked a guy from my church who I had a crush on to my homecoming. He was 19. My parents said no way. Me, being 15 and fairly rebellious, obviously didn't listen and met up with him at my dance. It was awkward because we didn't really know each other that well. So fast forward a couple years, I'm in college and I get an email from my best friend saying that Josh had been arrested for soliciting sex from a minor. He chatted up this 13-year-old online, drove 4 hours to her house, showed up to this little girl's house with condoms and booze, only to be greeted by police. Perverted justice got him. For the record, we did not hook up at my homecoming. I was a nerdy Catholic girl who really loved Weezer. Say it ain't so. A couple years back, I was watching through a ton of TCAO videos on YouTube. Great for a laugh. I recommend it. And there's an episode in Fortson, Georgia, with a guy named Cody Green on it. I happened to notice this guy looks, dresses, talks, and walks exactly like my older brother. Me, being the great brother that I am, showed the video to my mom, who only knows how to speak Spanish, and said, "Watch this video, tell me what you see." Her exact words translated to English were, "Why do you have a video of Raul? Whose house is he in? Who's that man? Why is he getting arrested?" And then she calls him to yell at him. Does that count? My old boss was on TCAP. He tried to have sex with a 13-year-old girl and was caught when they were in Petaluma. He was a bit of a jerk though, so I wasn't too broken up about it. I went out on a couple dates with a guy who got caught in a police sting by an undercover cop. Thing is, he was a young state patrol officer. He maintains the girl never stated her age, but they slammed him with everything they had, and he's a felon now and can only find crappy jobs. Honest question. How the heck does To Catch a Predator show the faces of those arrested? Being on that show would ruin your life, so you obviously would never sign a consent form. I thought without your consent they had to blur you. I've seen some episodes of cops with faces blurred, which I assume means all the others actually allow it. I mean, they're innocent until proven guilty, so you can't just say they're criminals and have no rights to consent. Anybody know? I've never known anyone on To Catch a Predator, but I used to know Philip Garrido before he was uncovered to be a crazy kidnapper guy. He ran a printing press with Alyssa, the girl he kidnapped and held for almost 20 years as his daughter and assistant. I had actually personally met her a few times. I can go more in depth if you guys would like. He wasn't on any show, but I know a guy that is 26 and dates a 14-year-old. Thing is that in my country nobody seems to give a crap about this sort of stuff. This kind of gap seems almost common here amongst many relationships. It's really messed up and nobody does anything about it. I'm from Romania. Not on the show but pretty creepy. We have a cottage on a lake and one of our neighbors was very nice. Took us tubing, invited us over for dinner, to watch fireworks, etc. He was very nice to me and my friend especially. One day I was reading the paper and it turns out that this guy was just arrested for raping his grandson. I was very freaked out. I still don't know what happened to him. Oh my god, this is the one AskReddit I can answer. It wasn't on To Catch a Predator but a FBI trap website for child pornography. He got off because he was in high school. He was 18 but some bull's law exploited him off. Everybody knew about it but he still got away with it. He was a fat pansexual annoyance who creeped on every single thing that looked his way. Everyone at the school hated him. Oh yay, he was also the only man on our cheerleading squad. He now goes to Rutgers somewhere, but honestly I couldn't care less about him. I was that guy. Having gone through the whole rigmarole, I can make a couple of points about how I feel I was treated. 1. The way they portray it on TV is very one-sided. The agents who set up the stings are actually rather aggressive in how they pursue older men. Granted, I fell for it, but the person who talked to me only made allusions to the fact that she was under 18. And I never really asked. All I saw was cute girl wants to hook up with me. Awesome. 2. It's pure entrapment, for the sake of entertainment. There is no real crime being committed, since arguably, it would be very unethical to have an actual underage girl talking to a guy. I got an acquittal because my lawyer was successfully able to argue entrapment, and due to the fact that the girl setting me up never explicitly disclosed her age, and the fact that no crime was actually committed. Actually, most of these cases are thrown out or argued down for exactly that reason. But by then, it doesn't matter. Everyone has already made their money off of your downfall, and at the end of the day you're just left with nothing and no way to move forward in life. 3. The whole process of publicly shaming someone is enough to ruin their lives. No conviction necessary. This is not how I was brought up to believe the justice system worked. Innocent until proven guilty my butt. 4. I feel that, at the heart of the issue, we're making spectacles out of people with legitimate mental illnesses and crucifying them. I don't believe that people choose who they are attracted to, and with as inhumanly as we treat some people, it makes me wonder who the real monsters are here. The ones who are acting on impulses they cannot control, or the ones who are inflicting cruel punishment in a cold, calculated manner for the sake of entertainment upon their fellow humans. Prob going to get buried, but I knew a guy in high school. He was a year older than I was, but I knew back then that he might be gay. After high school and 10 years later, he is really involved with the Catholic Church and says he wants to be a priest or something like that. Runs a couple of their youth programs and finally gets busted with a 13-year-old boy. He was 31 years old. I do. He was a midget, not exactly relevant, but he lived up the block from me. He was friends with my parents and he used to have barbecues frequently, which I would also attend. I was a very young girl at this time. We saw him on the show, my dad laughed, and we haven't heard from him or of him since. One of the guys was my JV baseball coach in high school. His son was a year older than me too. He was really weird and never really got along with many people. They moved to Florida my junior year. I'm from Texas, and my senior year he got caught on To Catch a Predator. He refused to actually go inside the house or do anything, and I think he was acquitted of all the charges, so the only thing on his record is the arrest. But yeah, it was crazy. All the guys at school were talking about it. The craziest thing was that he was around children all day at his job. I guess those kind of people tend to flock to that sort of thing. Shudder. The founder of Perverted Justice, Philip John Eade, the name he uses on the show is an assumed name he used, always creeped me out on the show. He seemed like those pastors that rail about homosexuals but are secretly doing lines of see off their boyfriend's buttocks. Sometimes you catch a predator. Sometimes you catch a young guy who is depressed, socially awkward and never had a girl's attention in his life. What's this? An instant message? No way, it's a girl's name. She must have made a mistake. This can't be right. Suddenly someone is interested in him. Thinks he's funny and sexy. He's nervous that she is 15, but that's only 4 years right. She wants to meet him. He is so nervous, but this is the only chance he's ever even had a glimpse at, to be close with another person. It's only 4 years difference, right? He tells himself he shouldn't, but she is so persuasive. She really wants to meet him. He is a virgin and simply having a girl talk to him in an flirtatious manner is intense. It's the most interaction he's ever had with a girl. He feels for the first time in his life a tiny glint of self-confidence appear in the void of loneliness. It shines like a beacon. She wants him to bring condoms and alcohol. He doesn't drink except for that beer he had at Christmas, but then he has never had sex, so it might help make him less awkward. There is a problem. He can't legally buy it, he's too young. She demands alcohol and condoms. She is so persuasive. His dad has a bottle of Jack Daniels in the cabinet. He'll use that. Flash forward 2 days. He is driving 2 hours away to meet her. Buying the condoms was awkward. He could feel the cashier's judgment. The look of as if you need these. His heart is racing from nerves. He's gonna screw this up. But she texts him. She can't wait to see him. She can't wait to see him. He reads it over and over. The self-confidence is a warm little glow on the inside. It's not much, but it's all he's ever had and it feels so very good. He's at her house. It's only 4 years right. This could be his future wife. When she's 30 he'll only be 34. That's a tiny gap. This is the break he's been waiting for. He knocks on the door. His palms are sweaty. A bubbly voice calls out. It's beautiful and happy and angelic. She tells him to let himself in and make himself at home. She's just doing her hair. He puts the alcohol on the counter and stands nervously. What should he say? Oh god, he's so bad at this already. He is so nervous. Brian, a man's voice calls his name. Why don't you have a seat over there? Chris walks into the room. Brian's heart sinks. Not because his life is over. He didn't really have one to begin with, really. But for a brief moment a blind man had been given sight, only to have it taken away for the entertainment of the masses. The warm little glow went out. Forever. TLDR. There are few more cruel forms of entertainment than that show. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.